36. Welcome to the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn, and we have Kirk and Kevin here with us. The reason I'm laughing is that we have a screen that's off to my right that I can see the fellows. That was a wave from Mr. Graybeard at the top. That's Kevin, and the handsome fella underneath him in the blue sweater. That's Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk's only been with me for the last 18 years, so he's sort of a new buddy, a new face for those that are part of this program. But anyway, this is a live stream. Oh, I can even say, so I can remember my own name in case, I get senile. It's now got a signature. That's very nice. Kevin, do you help Leah put that together?
We did a bit of that, yep.
Okay, you're the guilty party. Okay, there we are. But anyway, as I brought it up for tonight's program, this is the 36th episode of Qatsyr Harvest, as we are continuing to speak about Shabuah. No matter what you do to mute the sound, and we can't have sound coming from my computer for the show, otherwise it'll reverberate in the microphones and we'll have this terrible echo. So I had to mute it not once but twice. But we're all set now. I can see you fellas, and okay. We're ready to go. Normally we would have a third member of the team, but Wookie is producing with Leah today. He's already done one show, and he has a union.
Contract obligation.
Contract obligations. So he's not with us this evening as a co-host. What we've been talking about here is the unbelievable extent to which the religious will go to justify their faith. And the reason we've had to take this detour, if you will, in our presentation of Shabuah is that it's the one of Yahweh's 7 Moed Mikre that the Christians decided to usurp. What would possess them to miss out on the 3 most important days in human history, particularly when they claim to be all about salvation, and that's when Yahweh delivered salvation with the actual Messiah, nonetheless, and with the Son of God. Okay. You would have thought they would have, glommed right on to Chag Matzah with Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, because we are made immortal on Pesach, and we are perfected on Matzah, so that we can be the children of God on Bikurim. And since that was actually fulfilled by the Son of God and the Messiah, and delivers on the promises that they claim to be able to convey, you would have thought, if you're going to write a religion, that you'd be all over those 3, wouldn't you?
That'd be the one.
Well, you don't steal. I would.
Yeah. That'd be the where you'd go.
Yeah.
But no. They don't even mention them. No, they went, and they don't speak of Towrah or of, in fact, they don't speak of Towrah, Kippurim, or Sukkah either. And you think they would do that because their whole religion is based upon their man God is coming back, correct? Mm-hmm. Mr. Christ, isn't he supposed to return in a second coming of Mr. Christ? And they also want to have this. So of course they got real confused because the only mention of the rapture was by Paul, and he said it was going to happen during his lifetime. So he might have gotten that wrong by 2,000 years, but he was consistent because the boys got Shabuah wrong by 2,000 years too. And then the day that Yahweh is returning, they don't know that name, so maybe it didn't mean anything to them, with the Messiah, who is Dode, is on Kippurim. So if you're going to counterfeit a religion, you'd think you would say, if he's coming back, rather than not providing a date, you'd have provided the date. But of course, they didn't want to provide the date because, well, if it was Kippurim, then that it's pretty hard to annul the Torah, where Kippurim is nonetheless presented. But they managed to miss out on Kippurim, on Sukkah, which is when we all get to camp out with God and we return to the garden,
Right.
which is the actual entry into paradise, if you will, into the heavenly realm. They missed that too. So they just picked one, and the one they picked was Shabuah. But of course, they weren't very smart, so they didn't know the name Shabuah. They would have had a problem with it if they had used the name Shabuah, because what does Shabuah mean?
Sevens.
And seven, because it's
Probably.
seven. Shabuah, 7/7.
It's
So
more yeah.
7 Shabbats, or the promise of the Shabbat.
Uh-huh.
That's hard to make a important date on your calendar
Mm-hmm.
when your calendar replaces the Shabbat with Sundays.
Yeah.
But this is the one they picked. My last on X, as my wife's saying, you have to go. You have a family hour show, and now in 10 minutes. But I was busily posting on X. The feed into my Facebook page had this picture of Paul, and it had this caption: "Is that Paul taught Torah?" And that what he did is he corrected the Pharisees who were teaching Torah and Talmud just to teach pure Torah. So, of course, had to say, excuse me, but
Good luck.
Paul went to war against the Torah. The Torah's God, the Torah's people, the Torah's covenant, and the Torah's meetings. And oh, by the way, the Pharisees could not have been teaching Talmud. You know why they could not have been teaching Talmud at the time?
It wasn't written yet.
It wasn't written yet. It wouldn't be written for another 2 centuries. So it's just stunning what the religious will do to try to justify the utter stupidity of it all. And if you are a Christian and you're stumbling into this because it's live streamed on Facebook, it's live streamed on X, and also on several YouTube channels and on Rumble, consider this the greatest gift you've ever been given. You have been conned into believing a religion that has absolutely no basis of truth. Everything in the religion is a ripoff of something that was important to God, that was stolen from God and from his people to try to justify your faith. And somebody now comes along, a couple of handsome guys and a guy, and he was told to dress up this evening in his best shirt. So here's my colorful attempt. So 3 guys come along and they say, no, there's nothing in your religion that's true. It's every bit of it's false.
Yes.
And so you would think that if you're thinking, rather than getting mad at that individual, your correct response would be, wait a minute, I'm sacrificing my life and I'm believing this religion that he can prove is false.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be the greatest gift anybody could possibly give you? Because it frees
Tell me
you
more.
from the lie. Yes. It frees you from the lie so that you have the opportunity to learn about God and respond correctly to him.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very least, if he's so confident, and we're going to see in this program as we continue, and we have in the previous programs, we've absolutely destroyed the credibility of the Christian New Testament. I mean, spit it up, chewed it up, spit it out. There is nothing even
left.
remotely left of it. And the 5 volumes of Twistianity, disprove everything of it, from its creation to its contents, to its own internal contradictions, to its propensity to contradict God. And in so doing, you would think that if you were a thinking person as opposed to a believing person, your first attempt would be, since these people are so thorough and so competent at destroying what I have been led to believe, don't you think it might be a really good idea to see if I can disprove what they're saying?
Yeah. Right.
And if I can't disprove what they're saying, to say goodbye to the
word. Yeah.
Goodbye to the faith. I mean, that was my issue long ago, is that before I was introduced to YAHOWAH, I came to some 20 questions that not only couldn't I answer about Christianity, but I took to the top scholars in the religion, and they couldn't answer. And I realized that the reason nobody could answer is they didn't have an answer, and there never would be an answer for those questions. And any one of them independently proves that Christianity is false. You know, how can God say that his Messiah and the Son of God is Dode, and now you're claiming that God doesn't remember names, and it's Jesus? How can there be a Jesus when there wasn't even a J until the 17th century? How can there be a Christ, and how can that even be an important title when there is no prophecy regarding a Christ and a returning Messiah? There isn't even a prophecy on a returning Messiah. And so why would you steal that title and make it your title as if you were confirming something that was predicted when it wasn't? Why would you change the 7 annual meetings that Yahweh established and replace them with pagan holidays like Easter and Christmas? Why would you take a God who says, I am one, and then turn that into a Trinity?
Yeah.
Why would you come up with this idea that you were this great solution by God based upon Goy and Goyim and a Christian church, and yet throughout the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, there's no mention of a church, and no mention of Christians, and no mention of God doing anything with the Goyim other than said, don't pay any attention to them, don't follow them, don't emulate their ways.
Wow.
When did God replace the Shabbat? Never.
Never.
When did God come up with a second covenant? Never.
Didn't.
When did God replace his people? Never. When did God change his name? Never.
Yeah.
So there were just so many issues. This notion that you would be known by the image of a dead God on a stick, I found absolutely repulsive. But then again, Jews are known by the star, what they call the Star of David. And you recognize David didn't have a star. And Bar Kokhba did, but he was a false Messiah.
Yes.
And the star is the very symbol that the Roman Catholic Church, the Muslims, and the Nazis persecuted you under. I mean, that's like somebody calling you Bozo the Clown, and you finally being free of them, and somebody says, "What's your name?" Well, Bozo.
Right.
Hey, come on. It's just sad. But anyway, we have absolute, irrefutable proof that those who wrote the Christian New Testament, and most of the Christian New Testament is actually either written or inspired by Paul. And that's one of the things, again, we've talked about it in these programs, fellas, that Christians and Jews and even non-Christians do not know. They pick up if they're going to read it, the Christian New Testament, and it begins with Matthew, and they think, well, that must be the first book. But no, that book was written sometime around 95 CE by an absolute imposter, and 100% of the book is plagiarized. It's plagiarized from 3 different sources. I don't know, sometimes colleges have gotten so bad, particularly in the Ivy League, that plagiarizing from 3 sources may be called research. Yeah, but 80% of it comes from Mark and Luke, and the remaining 20 comes from the Ebonim, and so there is nothing original to it, and it's a complete fraud, and written 60 years after the events. And the book of John, we have no idea, just like Matthew, we have no idea who wrote it. We have no idea who wrote the book of John. It's not attributed in any way, nor is there any historic record, and it could not have been written prior to 95 CE. And
John's not a name.
Yeah, well, John's not a name either. But even if you try to say, but I think that going and trying to give the person a Hebrew name is a fool's folly. It gives credibility where credibility is not deserved. There is no evidence that the book that is called John was written by a fellow named John, and it could not have been written prior to 95 CE. And And even then, it would have been written in Ephesus, in Greek, not Hebrew, by a man who spoke Hebrew, not Greek. So those two are gone. And then you're dealing with Mark. Mark was deliberately usurped by Paul because he had been Peter's translator, which is kind of a weird thing because we're reading about how Shabbat was confiscated to become Pentecost, and the demarcation, according to Peter, of Pentecost was that all of the new Christians could speak whatever language they wanted to. And so I don't know, why would Peter need a translator? But nonetheless, that's who Mark was. And because he heard the stories of Peter, and because Paul hated Peter in the book of Galatians, Paul condemns Peter. He just literally tears him to ribbons. And so he found a way to lure Mark away from him. He said, I have a plan for him. I want to use him. And the guys do. And the next thing we read is that following Paul's death, Mark writes this gospel, and it's the gospel according to Paul. And then Paul's propagandist, Paul's spiritual and physical healer, is a fellow named Luke, and Luke writes his gospel mainly based upon Mark, but then with a whole lot of pagan embellishments from the Sibylline oracles and from the Odyssey. And he has his, so now we have Paul's 14 letters plus the two fellows that were under Paul's influence, and then you have the book of Acts, which is the story of Paul as told by his buddy Luke. And that's the order of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if people actually read the book in that order, and you read Galatians as the first book, and you realize, oh my God, this thing is really nasty.
Right.
Ooh, this is first. It's contradictory. It's anti-Yahowah. It's anti-Torah. It's anti-Jewish. It's anti-Semitic. It's and internally contradictory. And every passage that he claims actually condemns what Paul is saying, or directly condemns Paul. There wouldn't have been a Christianity if Eusebius had actually arranged it in the order that it was written, and had not augmented it and changed it so. But this is where we are. This is what we have, and we find that the New Testament was written by deliberate deceivers, very disingenuous con men who played the faithful for fools. They openly disparaged God. The basic theme of Paul is that God couldn't save anyone, and so his Torah was a complete waste of time. And his prophets were there for me to misrepresent, because God gave up, and he told me that I would be his representative to the world to contradict him. That's the essence of Paul's 14 letters. And if you believe that God is inept, and that Paul, who admits that he's demon possessed, he admits that he is a sexual pervert, and he claims, that he is this man who has been killed like 10 times, and and every letter he writes, he begins by saying, "How could you be so stupid? I was there with you. I told you what you needed to do, and the moment I leave, you turn against me." Well, it's like the Quran. With everybody that knew Muhammad thought he was demon possessed, and a numbskull who was plagiarizing the Quran. The same thing is true when you read Paul's letters. They all say that you think I'm a numbskull. You gave up on everything I said the moment I left. So damn you. That's what you read.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is astonishing that a religion of billions of people emerged from this foolology. And the worst part of it, from our point of view, is that it robbed Yahowah and his people of things that are very dear to them. And we wouldn't be criticizing Christianity if it were not for the fact that they stole things that belonged to Yahweh and to Yisrael, and that are important, and that speak of God's chosen son and replace him, and speak of the Messiah and replace him, and speak of the Savior and replace him, and speak of the Torah and replace it, speak of the Jewish people and replace them, speak of the God and replace him. The whole thing is robbing God and his people and pretending that the theft is now sanctified in the new religion. It's kind of like reading the 8th surah of the Quran, where stealing is lawful and good. That's the basis of Christianity. So rather than being inspired by God, Christianity is despised by God. And for these insights alone, our journey into Acts 2 has, I think, it paid dividends. Now, since Luke was not yet through tarnishing Peter's reputation, let's assume that Peter wasn't really as stupid as Luke portrays him. After all, it would give Luke, who was loyal to Paul, great pleasure to paint Peter as a fool. So let's see what else Paul's propagandists claim the supposed disciple said in the process of presenting Iousun Christoun as the reincarnation of Dionysus through the death of Dode, while implicating Yisrael for the crime on behalf of Goyim. Do I have that part right?
Yes. So
keep in mind that this ongoing saga follows their grotesque misappropriation of Yoel 2. Remember, Yoel 2 is a prophecy that even says it's end times, and it speaks of all the things that are going to happen and the last days. Of course, none of it happened even in their portrayal of Pentecost, which means Yoel didn't apply. That didn't bother them. Then they corrupted Psalm 16. Then they corrupted 2 Samuel 7. Then they misrepresented the 110th Mizmor. All to hijack Shabuah as part of replacement foolology. Now, just because every word conveyed thus far was libelous, malicious, and inflammatory, with no logical connection between the prophecies they pilfered and their proposition, nor any with reality, what's the harm of starting a new religion by disparaging and then counterfeiting the actual Messiah, inferring that Dode was dead so that a man God could replace him? I mean, Jews were demoted from chosen people to God killers. Surely the ends justify the means, right? Who would want to disparage Jews? As I was scratching my head again, trying to figure out how it is possible that such a high percentage of the world's most idiotic people have flocked to X. There was this blonde from, it looks like some Nordic country who posted that Jews are a great curse to humanity, and that Israel must be exterminated. And I chose not to respond because, why would you respond to somebody like that?
Right.
And this idiot posted it again, as if you're going to taunt me into a response. and it's just, I would say at least a quarter of the posts that I receive on X are about denigrating and demonizing Israel and Jews and blaming them for what has been done to them.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, I think the Nobel Prize Committee would disagree with the blonde from wherever.
25% of them. You heard them.
Well, I'm not sure if the Nobel
Oh,
Prize.
sorry, it's the other one.
The Nobel Prize Committee might agree with her as
well, now
they're pretty sick too, and I know the UN would
Yeah.
consider her for the next Secretary General. So I think with her intelligence level, she could actually replace the two blondes that are now leading the EU. And well, I would have accused the two blondes that are now leading the EU as being the great example of the Peter principle, but I didn't think that was fair to Peter. So, I haven't done so. Okay. So maybe it's not a great idea to denigrate God's people or to demonize them, but the Romans and the Greeks believed that denigrating and demonizing, killing the Jews, and then blaming the Jews for their own death was a great idea. And so if you wanted to start a religion that would be popular with the people that were really popular, the Romans and the Greeks, well, the best thing you could do is to demonize Jews, which is precisely what the Christian New Testament does and what Luke was quite expert at. But for what purpose? To anger God? To rob God's Son? To annul his testimony? To deny everyone a better life, eternal life, knowing the truth?
Yeah.
Well, I guess the answer was all of these things, right?
Oh, yeah.
So religion is not a victimless crime. The Christian co-conspirators actually had the chutzpah. I love that word. Yeah, it's one of my favorite words. It is fun to say, isn't it? Chutzpah. Yeah. Chutzpah. It's Yiddish.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a Hebrew word. It's a Yiddish word, which means it's a blend of about 5 different languages.
Yeah.
But they had the chutzpah to attribute their delusions to God. And that is the worst thing you can do. If you want to go create a religion, God really doesn't care. I am quite certain that the pantheon of Greek gods means nothing to Yahweh.
No.
The gods of however many thousand there are of ancient Egypt doesn't mean diddly squat to him. He is not impressed and doesn't really care about the gods of Rome and how they were the reincarnation of the gods of Egypt. And so the Mayan gods, the Aztecs gods, the Incas gods, the Carthaginian gods, the gods of everybody around the world at this time, the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Egyptians and et al., really means nothing to it. And the Christian God and the Muslim God wouldn't mean anything to him either if it wasn't for the fact that the Christian God is designed to annul everything that is important to the actual God. And that sort of ticks him off. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the problem with the Islamic God. His primary mission is the annihilation of the human race. And that sort of irritates God too. So he does have a fair amount to say about those religions. And he's really upset at Jews for Judaism. That's his number one pet peeve, is Jews and Judaism. So, there are lots of contributors and co-conspirators in this. As a matter of fact, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam share one thing in common.
Rabbis.
You know what that is?
Yeah, well, they tried to base it on the Torah, Prophet Islam, by twisting everything.
Well, yeah,
credibility.
Yeah, kind of.
Rabbis.
Yeah, there's not much out of the Torah that's really.
I guess not.
Yeah, that's that.
Well, they hate Jews.
The Christian and the Islamic version of the Torah are so twisted through the Talmud that there really is, and through just the demonic minds of the authors, there really isn't any basis there. No, the common denominator of the 3 Abrahamic religions, rabbis. Rabbis.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, rabbis. Yeah, it would be impossible to have written the Christian New Testament without rabbinic training. Yes. And so it is the Rabbi Paul, who was the first, by the way, to use the term. No one else used that term for another almost 30 or 40 years thereafter, and he writes the term in his New Testament. He's actually the one who conceived the term rabbi, or the first to apply it to himself in a written document. And it was the schooling that he received on the text of the Torah and prophets that enabled him to misrepresent them, to know where to go to cherry pick something that he could twist to create the impression he wanted to convey. And he also learned from the rabbis this antagonism towards God, this sense of superiority over God, that rabbinical arguments and conniving was more important than what God had to say. And so he learned the attitude, and he learned the knowledge that he needed from the rabbis, who are experts in understanding, but dunderheads when it, experts in knowing, but dunderheads when it comes to understanding. I blew my own line. They really don't understand. And if you don't understand, you are prone to twist things and misrepresent them. And Paul was expert. And so the Rabbi Paul is the reason that Christianity exists. He created the religion. You can't blame it on Jesus, because Jesus never existed. So it's Paul that created the religion of Christianity, and he was a rabbi. And it's a rabbi. Akiba was really the founder of rabbinic Judaism, the one that came up with the false Messiah, Bar Kokhba, where Israel gets its star. And he was the first that began to move Israel towards a written Talmud. And then it is the Babylonian Talmud and the rabbis' citations of it that give the Quran all of its religious flavor. So it is rabbis that created all three religions, and that is to their shame. So if it were not enough to certify their endurance, stay, and Sheol, the whole lot of them, the authors of the Christian New Testament blamed the Jews, not the Romans, for killing their God. This is the ultimate blood libel. And that's why when you hear Christians like Huckabee is trying to get confirmation to be the ambassador to Israel, and he says, I love the Jewish people because my religion is based on Judaism. Yeah, my Jesus was a Jew. No, I mean, the fact is that the Christian New Testament is every bit as anti-Semitic as is Mein Kampf, as is the Quran.
Yeah.
And it's really the basis of global anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism that the Nazis capitalized upon to take the pogroms to the next level for the Holocaust was only possible because of the influence of Roman Catholicism and its grotesque anti-Semitism. The dead God they hold up on a stick they claim was killed by Jews. So this continues. This is Acts 2:36. Therefore, when you say therefore and all you've done is lie so far, that's probably not a good transition. Consequently, these things being so, let every household in Israel. Now, this was written by somebody at a later date who was out of touch with reality. What's the problem with every household in Israel? And that's how it's written, by the way. It's actually written as Yisrael.
It's Yisrael.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
What's the problem with writing?
Yehuda. It was Yehuda, our Judea.
Oh, yeah,
there was
because
no
nobody,
Israel.
they're all
Yeah.
gone. The 10 tribes are gone.
There was no Israel
That's right, yes.
at this time. There had not been a Yisrael for 700 years.
Yeah, century.
And there would not be a Yisrael for another 1900 years.
Pretty sure the Yehudim at the time knew that.
And I'm pretty sure the Yehudim knew that.
Very good.
And so did the Romans. It was the province of Yahud.
Mm-hmm.
There was not the province of Judah, because there was no J in Latin. No. There was no J in Hebrew. There was no J in Greek. In fact, there was no J until the 17th century. So it was the province of Yahud. And it was, therefore, there was no household in Israel. And that's how it's written. And the Greek had the ability to write all of those letters, and it's written Israel in the Christian New Testament. So let therefore every household in Israel know, gnosko, to acknowledge, with certainty, as follows, beyond any doubt, that the Kyrion, now it's actually KN, it was a placeholder for this, but the placeholder was for Kyrion, that the Kyrion, the Lord, performed what was required to cause him the placeholder for Christon, Kai Ro, what is it? New. Cairo New. It's been a long time since I've translated Greek. One time I was very fluent in it, and now it's been a long time since I've translated. Yeah. But Cairo New is the placeholder. So the Lord made him the Christ. Okay. What does Yahowah say about who happens to be God? And they're claiming now that the Lord, that would mean that there has to be somebody above, beyond, over this Mr. Christ, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so it has to be somebody above Mr. Christ. And this above Mr. Christ fellow is now the Kyrion. What does Yahowah say about the title Lord?
It's Hasatan, is it?
Yeah, it's Hasatan's title. In fact, when in Hosea, when Yahowah explains that when he comes back, he actually reveals that the thing that he's going to enjoy most is he's never going to have to hear the title Lord again.
Yeah. It says, yeah.
And he also says that referring to him as the Lord is a man-made tradition taught by rote.
Yeah.
And the false god that Elia, our buddy Elia, he was tasked with repudiating the two false, where they were integrated religious cult of Baal and Asherah. So Baal was the primary god, false god of the religion of being practiced in Israel back in the days of Elia. What does Baal mean?
The Lord.
Yeah, Lord, doesn't it? And so Lord is a false god. So if you've got a false god making him the Christ, then the Christ is a phony.
Yeah.
Now, if he made him the Christ, you would assume that there has to be a Christ that is referenced someplace, right? Because that would otherwise you might say, I made him the Mortimer Fudd. I made him the Easter Bunny. I made him Santa Claus. I made him the Tooth Fairy.
Yes.
Why not come up with, because Christ is based upon the Greek word chiro.
Oh, chiro.
And that word means drugged.
Drugs, yeah.
That's why, I hear it's Cairo. Well, Cairo is what you see on every pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
They reverse the order. They make it Ro Chi, but that's RX.
Yes.
Correct?
That's all good.
Right. So Chiro is the basis of Christone or Christu is, in fact, the application of drugs.
Yes.
Now, is there any place that, let's pretend that by calling him the Lord, that they were actually speaking of the one true God whose name is Yahweh, and they just didn't know his name, which means they couldn't be writing for him. But is there any place in the Torah or in the prophets where there is a Christone, Christu, Christ, Christos?
No.
Oh,
No.
come on. It's got to be.
It's
Well,
in
you
there.
would hope, wouldn't you?
Well, it's a whole religion based on Mr. Christ.
That's why it's stuck there.
Billions of people that call themselves Christians.
Yes.
So surely there has to be a reference to Christ or Christian somewhere, right?
Oops.
Yeah, not that I've seen.
Oh, we have, guess who?
Oh. Hey, we're good.
We have the Wook that wants to come up and contribute to the show. He says, I heard that I was being disparaged as a union guy, and I want to let you know here.
I'm on the job.
I am not union, so you can just forget about that. So there he is. He's very concerned. Happens to be with the dog that is sharing the screen, because dogs are not self-aware.
Right.
Only elephants are self-aware. And so when he sees the dog on that screen, that is a rival to him. And so he is not aware that he is that guy. He wants to go attack it. So there you go. So the fact is that, and I've translated most of it. And of course, we've all read all of it many, 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 many times.
Yeah.
There is no reference anywhere in the Torah and prophets to a Christ. There's no reference to a Christian. There is not even a reference to an arriving Messiah. The only place where the term without the definite article, because this is Tov Christon, the only place that there is a mention without a definite article, so it's not used as a title, is found is when the actual Messiah, though David, as Gabriel, God's most capable man, is informing Daniel, telling him when exactly he is going to arrive to the date to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And he did exactly as he said. And so you can't count that as since that's the only reference to a future arrival of a Messiah. You can't count it, because what he said, he was going to be cut off, but not for himself, and to be separated, cut off, but not for himself, means that he is fulfilling at that moment matzah. Okay,
Yes.
It doesn't say that his body is going to die, but he's going to be cut off, but not for himself. So that means that he is fulfilling the day that he is separated from. Wookie is actually kissing the monitor now to tell me that he thinks I'm a pretty good guy. So there you go. So he is foretelling the day that he's going to arrive to fulfill of all things matzah, because that's the day that he is separated, but not for himself, because he's carrying our guilt into Sheol. So you even see the producer's lovely hand coming underneath the screen to keep Wookie from eating the dog in the screen. So there you go. So he says he's going to be cut off, which means he's fulfilling matzah, and he gives the exact date, which happens to be in Chag Matzah in 33 CE. So if you're going to use that, then you have a couple of problems. One is the title is Messiah and not
Mashiach.
Second, the actual Messiah is the one who is offering the prophecy. Then he's speaking about himself. That's your second problem. Your third problem is he's speaking of matzah, and guess what you never mention even once anywhere in the Christian New Testament?
Chag and
Yeah,
matzah.
because according to the Christian New Testament, nothing happened on the Shabbat. You describe what happened on Passover without claiming it's Passover, but then you go right to your Easter Sunday, which is really Bikurim, but you never even mention what happens on matzah, and that's the prediction. It's the fulfillment of matzah, and you completely disregard it. So can't be your guy. It just can't be. And that's the only place where there is a future Messiah. So Christ is a complete dunderhead move in every possible way. And so, the Lord, he may have made him the Christ, but that's Satan. it's for damn sure that Yahweh didn't, because he has a Messiah, and his Messiah told us exactly when he was going to arrive and what he was going to do, and he did it. So then it says, so the Lord made him the Christ. And God, I guess his God is supposed to be different than the Lord.
Right.
This Jesus, Ayusun, it's a placeholder again for it. But this Ayusun. So could you please tell me, since we know there was no mention of a Christ, no Mr. Christ, where is there a Jesus? Jesus is this big deal, right? You got the biggest religion in the world based upon Jesus, and it's God making him this. So you would think that God would have a reference somewhere to him, right?
Not a chance.
Is there a reference to a Jesus anywhere?
No, sir.
No.
Nowhere.
Is there a reference to even a Hebrew version of this Greek name?
No. No, sir.
No. In fact, if he's going to be somebody that God's going to use in this way, what's he got to have? He's got to have a Hebrew name, and Ayusun is not a Hebrew name.
Hardly.
And there is no reference anywhere in the Torah and prophets of anyone that has a name anywhere even remotely close to an Ayusun or an Ayusu or an Ayusus.
Ayusus. Yeah.
And the reason there's three of them is that it has to fit Greek grammar rules, and they that depending on the context, it's either Ayusu, Ayusus, or Ayusun. There is no such thing. So God, this Ayusun, no. And it's, by the way, it's Theos. So no, there is no person named that. It's not a Hebrew name. So this Mr. Christ and Dr. Jesus, no, there is no such thing. And then it goes on to say, whom you crucified. You pieces of war rot. God, I hate Luke and Peter and Paul. Whom you crucified. Do you think that the Jews and Yahudah crucified anybody ever?
No, not a chance.
They would have thrown rocks.
Well, there actually, I'm not sure there even is an example where they actually stoned anyone. But yeah, and the process for the Passover lamb is to slit the Passover lamb's throat in the most merciful way possible.
Yeah.
There is no Torah instruction on crucifixion.
No.
There is an explanation of crucifixion, however. There's a very detailed and long explanation about crucifixion. And it's actually by the Messiah. It's in the 22nd Mizmor, where he speaks of his own crucifixion, 700 years before Roman crucifixion was invented.
Yeah, it's very scientific too.
So yeah, it's very scientific in its explanation of crucifixion. And so if you're going to use the term crucifixion, you've got to go to the prophetic story and depiction of crucifixion, and it was written in first person by
Dude.
the Messiah. So that doesn't work for you so well. And the Yahud and Yahudah had not only no authorization for crucifixion, they had no authority to kill anyone. They had, the legal system was Roman, and crucifixion was a Roman form of punishment.
They couldn't even handed him over because he volunteered.
Well, first of all, if the Yehudim of the day had handed the Messiah over to serve as the Passover lamb,
Right.
Well, that would be.
You're doing the right thing. You're acknowledging what needs to be done. So if they actually did it, then they should be applauded. Because, of course, this doesn't say that. But if they actually did it, they should be congratulated, because if the Passover lamb doesn't serve as the Passover lamb, then there is no doorway to life, and we all die.
Yes.
So they missed the entire thing. So if they want to pretend that they're Mr. Christ and this God Jesus was crucified, and yet he isn't the Passover lamb, what's the point?
Yes, it's horrible.
Yeah,
It's
just
death.
horrible. It died for absolutely for nothing. And if you want to say that your guy was crucified, well, then that has to be Dode, because he's the one who prophetically speaks of crucifixion. And you would think, too, that since this 22nd Mizmor is so visual and gripping and descriptive of crucifixion, that if you're going to promote the myth, why wouldn't you cite that?
Mm-hmm.
You'd say he was crucified, as is explained in the 22nd Mizmor Psalm.
Other than it being in first person, that would give up a dig.
Oh, there you go and spoil it.
And it being written by Dode.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, well.
So
I would hate to debate y'all.
no, but come on. By the way, crucified here is written as if it's a divine implement. It's written in a placeholder.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
It's not actually written out as sturu. It's actually a placeholder for the aorist active tense of the verb sturu. So, and sturu would mean affixed to an upright stake.
Good call. Wow.
Yes. So they're deifying the implement here. They're deifying the act by using the placeholder. And it's every time that the placeholder is used, it is always deified. So they have turned the dead God on a stick into a deification, a religious idol. But let's just be clear. This is an outright lie, and it's blood libel, and it was used to demonize Jews, and the entire purpose was conniving, because those who wrote the Christian New Testament, after stealing everything that God said about his son and the Messiah who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim, they needed to replace Yehudim and Yisrael to have a religion. Because if the Passover lamb offered his life, it would have been for the chosen people, for Yisrael. And so you had to make the man God hate Jews sufficiently that he would say, okay, all those promises I made to Jews, I'm reneging on all of them, and I'm going to actually now transfer all of those promises, because of the Jews crucifying me, to the people who actually crucified me.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah, big leap.
I'm going to hate the Jews who didn't actually crucify me, and this is a lie, and I'm going to hate them for not crucifying me to such an extent that I'm going to replace all of my promises that I have made to them, thousands of them, and I'm going to replace them with the very goy who did crucify me and who have lied about it.
Nonsensical.
Wow. Well, that's so far beyond nonsensical that I'm not sure the English language has a word for that. I mean, appalling, obnoxious, grotesque, don't do it justice.
Right.
I mean, for that statement alone, Christianity has no right to exist. If you're a Christian, you should just put your head in a hole right now and cry. You should almost want to claw your eyes out. And that is how awful this is. Because it is being used to demonize Jews so that they pretend God that they stole by creating a counterfeit of the actual Messiah and Son of God who actually fulfilled Passover, by not referencing Passover and focusing on crucifixion, which is how the Passover lamb actually foretold that he would fulfill Passover. And now they're blaming the Jews for killing him, which was he was sent to do exactly that, so they could be demonized, so that the people who actually crucified him and lied, blaming the God's people for doing it,
Mhm.
could become the chosen people.
Wow.
That's stunning. You just almost want to, the Hebrew word would be salah, pause and contemplate that. At this point, you could just fold it up and say, your Christian New Testament is beyond rubbish. It's like the Quran. I would strongly advise not burning it because it's toxic. But that's where we are. Acts 2:36 is a confession to the greatest crime that has ever been committed. Well, not a word of it was true. And most of it was designed to discredit and upend the Torah and prophets. And for this, as well, just as the truth. And for this, there will be hell to pay. When they come up for trial in the weeks following Dod's return in year 6000 Yah, the first and last question that will be asked will likely be, did you say and write these things when you knew that they were without merit and you were aware of the implications, and yet you said them anyway, knowing that you would cause undue suffering for God's people? So did you do and say these things and not care of the great harm that you were going to perpetrate on God's people? Because Leah's Jewish when she went to school and is a youngster. The other children in the school, Roman Catholics, said Jesus killer.
Mm-hmm.
Happens every day.
Yes.
Jesus responds, yes, I did, and I would do it again. I am actually a Jesus killer.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm not Jewish, but I am a Jesus killer.
Right.
Because I have proven that Jesus never existed. But the question, the only really question that can be asked is, did you, knowing that the consequences would be so egregious to God's people, and that even the people that you said you were representing, the Goy, that you certified that not a single one of them would ever make it into heaven, and that they would be betrayed, and that you would steal their freedom, you would steal their souls, you would steal their money, you would steal their brains, and you still did this. You perpetrated this grotesque and obvious lie, and you didn't even care about the consequence. You didn't even think through, wait a minute, okay, what's God going to think about this?
Right.
One of the things that's interesting about God is that he's just.
Mm-hmm.
And that means there are people, Peter and Paul and Luke are among them, who, and so will all of the popes will all be among them as well. Most Muslim leaders will be as well. The Spanish who were part of the Inquisition will be. Yeah. That all of the Nazis that perpetrated the Holocaust, including the Muslim, the Grand Mufti, who encouraged it to go from the extermination or from the exile of Jews to the extermination. They're everyone who perpetrated the atrocities of 10/7. There are people whose acts are so egregious that they're not going directly to hell. They're going to receive sevenfold the torment that they inflicted. And those that they inflicted upon are going to get closure because they're going to see those who devastated them suffer for what they have done. And it is the only fair response. So there is something actually far worse than being sent to Sheol, which is hell. And that is the recompense that has been earned and is deserved that precedes it. And I, at one point, cringed a little bit at this. And then I began to understand why it's necessary, the closure for God's people. It's the only way to be fair. And then as we kept on reading about the roles that we've been asked to play, and you fellows are likely going to be participants in this, we're the judges and executioners of this.
Yes, I got it.
It's so, yes. Is it God's responsibility? Yes. Does he delegate everything to Do David? Yes. But Do David's delegating this one, and it's going to fall right in our lap. And at this point, I would have zero mercy.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, none. And we won't actually have to inflict the blows. We will have Malak that will do this, and we won't have to hang around and watch it. But those who were tormented will have that opportunity. The girls who were raped by the Muslims on 10/7 and then had their hips and pelvises broken as they were being mutilated, and then were cut up and with the knives as it was happening, and gang raped, and then peed upon, and then had their breasts cut off and played with as if they were toys. They deserve closure.
Yes, sir.
And the Muslims that perpetrated this deserve to be tortured. And they're going to get 7 times worse than they inflicted. And if that gives you pause, if that causes you to be uncomfortable, great, you won't be there. So don't worry about it. One of the things that I learned a long time ago, fellas, and this is actually a more somber version of our exposure of the Christian New Testament, because this is just so disgusting, is that if I adjusted my thinking to Yahweh's thinking, that chances are I was going to be in a pretty good place mentally. And since this is Yahweh's thinking, I've adjusted mine to it. And so I have no problem with this at all. I'm looking forward to a responsibility that I would have objected to previously, but not now. This is deserved, and it must be done. And so the people that Christians revere, I'm here to tell you, I'm going to torture them. I'm going to hold them accountable for all of the suffering that they have inflicted on God's people because of what they wrote and we just read. And if you promote Christianity, I'm going to hold you accountable too. Now, while it is, of course, certain that the Christian New Testament is implausible and inaccurate, it is likely that its central characters, Peter, Paul, and Luke, Mark, John, and Timothy, existed in some capacity. And it's just like when you read through the Quran. A lot of people say, Muhammad's a myth, he never actually existed. I said, no, it's not true. When you look at what happened in Yathrib and in Kabar and around the Kaaba, and the war of compulsion immediately thereafter to whip all of Arabia into compliance with Islam, and then the 200 million people that died in the next 100 years as Islam assaulted the world. Something so radically changed, and it's so consistent with what we read about Muhammad in the Quran, that the idea that he didn't exist is implausible. And because of the fact that there was this gaggle of goons led by Paul, who came up with this travesty of this of identity theft, really, and this crude counterfeit, and wrote about it on behalf of Satan. I think these characters existed. I think there actually was a Shimon who was like the name Peter, a Shaul who changed his name to the Roman Paulos because it sounded like Apollo. And there was a Lucas who is the equivalent of the Halal ben Shakar, Satan, and a Marcus and a John, and Paul's lover boy, Timothy. I think they existed in some capacity. And the most logical deduction would be to assume that these players, by whatever names, wrote the drafts of this material, and the first century CE, with Paul's letters to the Galatians being written about 666 years after Yahweh denounced him through Chabauk, and that he, over the next, between 52 CE and 66, Paul wrote all 14 of his appalling letters, and that he died in 66 in Rome alone, disgraced, but that Luke and Mark then created the Gospels and the Book of Acts, and that for the next 2 or 3 decades was Christianity. And then it was Eusebius, under Constantine's control, decided not only what to conglomerate together and what order to put it in, but he completed the text with its most important lines being authored at that time. So I think these individuals did exist in the first century. And so the punishments for them have to fit the crime. No punishments, though, for Mr. Christ. He gets off scot-free. Punishing Mr. Christ would be like punishing Dionysus or or Odysseus. You know, I'm sorry. It just that is way beyond my pay grade to say you want me to do what to a myth. So we're going to go after the perpetrators of the myth and not the subject of their myth. What Israel should know with absolute certainty is that Yahweh anointed Dowd as Hamashiach, not once but 3 times, because he would live 3 lives. There was no Christ, Mr. or otherwise. There was no Jesus, no Iusus, Niusu, Niusun. Moreover, it was the Romans, not the Jews, and they crucified Dowd. And it occurred on Passover. And that's another thing. If you want to take Dowd's portrayal of crucifixion, well, it occurred on Passover, and you'd have to acknowledge that it was Passover, and that the separation was on matzah, and you'd have to acknowledge matzah, and you couldn't have an Easter Sunday because it's now Bokurim.
Mm-hmm.
And so your whole story falls apart if you actually turn to the evidence, that provides it. So the authors of the Christian New Testament are devoted to lying on behalf of their Kyrion, Iusun, Christon, although at this point he's not the Kyrion. The Kyrion is the one who made him Mr. Christ, and that it was God who made him the Iusun. Well, antagonizing Yahweh and discrediting Israel, as if they believed that the creation of their religion was predicated on the destruction of everything that God had previously revealed. Well, that's a bad way to begin. The founders of the Christian religion had the audacity to attribute their demonic delusions to God, and then to condemn his people for not believing them. We have a conundrum. Beyond the fact that they were unconvincing liars, openly twisting the evidence while violating the rules of logic, the reason Jews rejected Peter, Paul, and Luke is that each lie was bolstered by another. It was nothing but a string of lies. A religion based upon identity theft and counterfeiting, where the very premise is preposterous. First, there was no Israel at the time. We've talked about that. It had been ransacked by the Assyrians nearly 8 centuries, but 7 to 8 centuries prior. So this is certain that the Yehudim living in Roman-occupied Yehudah would have been fully aware of their reality. Mm-hmm. There was no way they were going to be fooled into thinking that they were Yisrael. And if somebody called them Yisrael, they'd say, come on there, nincompoop, read the sign. Second, the king of Second, the kind of things known to every household in Judea are known to us today through written history. For example, Judea was occupied and oppressed by Rome. What happened in 70 CE? Wasn't there an emperor named Nero that sent a wannabe emperor in Vespasian who grabbed his son, who also wanted to be emperor, and they cobbled together some legions, and they pummeled the province of Judea, and they actually destroyed the temple. So I don't think there was any mistaking the fact that they knew they were occupied and oppressed by Rome.
Yeah.
It was obvious. It was pervasive. It was palpable. It was undeniable. By contrast, had the Golgotha Polling Institute been deployed to undertake a survey at the time to inquire of every household of Judea, do you know with certainty that the Curion made Iusun the Christon? The result of the inquiry would have revealed the opposite of Peter's claims. And there would have been an overwhelming 99.99 to 0.01 among the beguiled. So the opposite of what he claimed was true. And apart from him and his fellow charlatans, there would not have been a single person, much less a household, in Roman-occupied Judea who would have recognized the Greek name and title Iusun Christun, or in this case, Mr. Christon, God made Iusun. And they would have known that their God, the one who inspired the Torah and prophets, engaged with and spoke through Hebrews in Hebrew, not to Greeks in Greek. Iusun would have been as unfamiliar to them as would be the concept of a Christon. As proof, there isn't a single affirmation of this person or concept from the time in Judea or anywhere else in the world, at least apart from that fabricated by the Roman Church and its grope for power and control. And this includes the despicable and discredited traitor Josephus.
Yeah.
Now, moreover, if everyone knew, why was Peter so desperate to convince them? Why was he willing to misrepresent prophecy so obviously and egregiously if the debate had been settled in his favor? Now, I made a statement here, fellas, that is the go-to for Christians. They say, well, you can't say there was no Jesus because Josephus is a contemporary witness, and he says there was a person named Jesus who they called the Christ. It says right there in Josephus's books, and therefore, I have a contemporary witness. You're wrong, because he was a Roman historian. Well, there's a couple of holes in that story, aren't there?
I think it too. Yeah.
Well, do you know when Josephus was born?
Later, I don't know. I really don't.
Okay, 37 CE.
Okay.
So how old was Josephus in 33 CE?
-4.
-4. So was Josephus a contemporary eyewitness to this event?
No.
No. Okay. Josephus was a despicable traitor, wasn't he?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
In fact, if you were to say, I want to know the most disreputable Jew of the time, whose name would come up?
Shaul. But
Well,
we'll
no,
go with
well, that
Josephus.
we know, and God knows that. But in terms of an independent Jew that could corroborate a story, who was the most disreputable Jew of the time, of the age?
Josephus as well.
No contest. He was by far the most devious and repulsive. He was the man who claimed that he had been promoted from cleric to general, and that he decided rather than fight the Romans that he would surrender to them, but not until after a fake suicide pact where everybody associated with him took their life. He got the short straw, and so when it came time to take his life, he decided not to do it, and he decided that he would turn tail and go to the Romans and then tell the Romans how to kill Jews and all the secret ways into Jerusalem and the most effective ways to kill his own people. This is your witness, right? That's the guy you're going to pick to say, oh, yeah, no, I got proof. He is my guy. That's your guy, right?
Right.
Right. And what is that guy's most famous story? He is most famous for writing what story, Josephus?
It's been so long.
No, the young lady here wins again.
Yeah,
I married her for a reason. She's smart.
Yeah, boy.
The story of Masada. And the story of Masada is a what? It's a suicide pact, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Noble, we hung out, we fought the Romans, we did the best we could, and finally, when all the food went out and there was no hope left, we all killed ourselves. Suicide pact. He wrote the story to justify his own fake suicide pact. But guess what? Archaeology now has proven that the story of Masada was completely faked. That they weren't noble Jews holding out in resistance to Rome. They were thieves. And the only reason Rome went after them is they stole from a Roman plant that was making a product that actually supported the cost of the Roman occupation of Judea. And rather than holding out for months and months and months, the siege took a week. And so the siege was against bandits, not righteous men. There was no suicide pact, and it lasted a week, and it was the entire story was as a fable created by Josephus. So we know that in his most important story, he lied. Okay, so he wasn't a contemporary witness, so he was the most despicable man, and he's known for lying. And this is your guy, right? When is the oldest manuscript of Josephus? The oldest manuscript that Josephus, he wrote in Greek. Wrote in Greek in Rome. Of course, he was a Hebrew, skilled in Hebrew, who wrote in Greek and Latin Rome. But beyond all that, when is the oldest extant Greek manuscript of Josephus's work?
I don't know. No, sir.
Kevin, you know?
No, I was going to somewhere in 100, just to guess.
100?
Yeah. No. First, he wrote in sometime in 93, I think is when he wrote, 93, 94. So he's actually writing 6 decades, which would be 3 generations after the fact. And he's writing in Rome, which is the other side of the world at this point. So it's not exactly a contemporaneous event. He's writing 60 years after the fact in Rome, in Greek. No, the oldest extant manuscript of this contemporaneous proof dates to the 10th century, fellas.
Wow.
The 10th century. Yeah. Take that and choke on it.
Only 900 years, it's.
Oh my God. And this is you're going with this. This is your proof? Oh my God. Now, the other thing is that those who've actually taken the time, and I'm going to do a research project on this. I've studied it a lot, but there is a particular individual that is probably the foremost expert in the world on it. And what he has proven and he's had published in scholarly documents is that the line in Josephus's work, it just says there was somebody named, and they use, he actually uses a Greek name, so there was no person by a Greek name. So the very fact that name appears in Greek means that Josephus could not have written it because he would have known there was no Greek person at that time. And second, he would have known there was no title called Christ. But at that point, because in 52 CE, Paul started writing his letters, and he wrote his last letters in Rome. In fact, his piece de resistance
is his ode to the Romans, which is exactly where guess who wrote, and that ode to the Romans was written right around 60 CE.
Yes.
And Josephus is writing about 93 CE. All he does is say, yep, there it is. There's a reference here that somebody was named whatever, Iusun, laughable as that may be, who was called the Christun. Simply a reference to the
lie that he
letter
told.
that lies that Peter told. So that doesn't work very well. But there's a bigger problem. There are citations from this alleged text by guess who? Guess who actually had the original autograph of what Josephus wrote in Greek? Somebody actually had a copy of it. Guess who is the most nefarious character in the entire story of the Christian New Testament?
Well, Eusebius, I would think.
Smart, that smart woman over there. She wins the prize again.
Oh, well.
Eusebius. Eusebius is the person who cites it the most often, who had the original manuscript, and who destroyed the original manuscript. And so Eusebius is the same guy who in the 4th century wrote, "You are the Christ, upon this rock I will build my church," which is the only reason that there is a Christianity. The only reason that there is a Mr. Christ is because of that line. And he inserted it in the 4th century, because prior to the 4th century and all of the 70 extant manuscripts found in the 2nd, 3rd, and early 4th century, guess what's not in any one of them?
Same thing.
That line. None of them. Single most important line to Christianity. It's not in a single manuscript. 70 of them, not one. And then it appears for the first time in the 2 manuscripts that Constantine authorized Eusebius to write, that Eusebius takes credit for, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. There you go. Guess who wrote it? Eusebius.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then he destroyed the originals. And that's what you're going with. So if that is your proof that there was somebody named Jesus in the 1st century, you got squat. You got nothing but aim on your face. In fact, here's your sign. You're an idiot. Fellas, it's just astonishing how readily people are fooled and played for fools. So that's the truth. So here we are. Now, moving on, there had been no interaction with, no sign of, nor even a prophetic word from Yahweh over the past 5 centuries. He had promised as much, and they were dealing very poorly with that reality. So there had not been a single interaction, not a single sign, not even a prophetic utterance from Yahweh over any one of the centuries prior, going all the way back 1,500 years prior to this event, about anything they were claiming. And of course, they knew it, and they were dealing very poorly with that reality. So all they did is steal little snippets from here and there that didn't apply to them at all, and misrepresented them, mistranslated them, misconstrued them, misrepresented them, and said, "Oh yeah, this is my guy." And all you have to do is to read what was actually said, beginning with in context in particular, to realize that in every case God was actually saying the opposite of what they claimed. Now, Yahweh's commitment to curtail, and this is one of the interesting things, that when Dod as Gabriel spoke to Daniel, and he talked about the specific day that he would arrive, which should have been prophecy enough. The Jews should have recognized. He gave the exact day that he was going to arrive to fulfill Chag Matzah, and then described fulfilling Chag Matzah. But he also said that there would be no prophecy after that. So your Jesus can't offer any prophecy. If he can't offer prophecy, he can't speak for God. He can't offer any. It was the end of prophecy. We no more. God had already told everything we needed to know. There would be no more prophecy. We'd come to explain prophecy, but there would be no more prophecy. That's exactly what he said. So since there would be no more prophecy, and the last was Malachi, and nobody spoke about this fella, and everybody spoke about Dode, the whole thing is nothing but, as I say, it's identity theft. And the prophecies all speak about the Messiah, Dode's fulfillment of Chag Matzah. Therefore, the Kyrion Lord could not have made an Ayusu Jesus a Mr. Christoon Christ, whatever these mythical misnomers may have meant to anyone at that time, even if they were said at that time. And the likelihood is there was never, during that time, a mention of a person named Ayusu, Ayusun, nor a mention of a Christus or Christon. It's highly likely that those terms were never used, because if those terms had been used, no one would have believed them. So it would have been, the religion would have died before it started. It is only looking back and projecting a name back in time, and people say, well, that's the name of God. And people are so easily fooled that they can't even fathom that Jesus is a myth and never existed. But at the time, that would have killed the religion before it even started if they had actually used those names. When Yahweh was last present among his people, it was obvious. And when he returns, it will be obvious again. And so, by the admission of the obvious, he had not been among them to manufacture or designate another Greek god. During the 1,000 years that Yahweh spoke vociferously to Israel and Yehudah, beginning with Moshe and concluding with Malachi, and it's exactly 1,000 years between them, he never mentioned turning to an Ayusun or turning a Christon into an Ayusun. There were thousands of prophecies regarding how he and his son would interact with his people in the future, but the son's name was Dode, not Ayusun, Jesus. And he was anointed Masiach, not a Christon, drugged Christ. More importantly, he had come to fulfill Pesach and Matzah for the benefit of Bokurim, none of which are even mentioned by the Twistians. The reason that Peter had to misappropriate, misconstrue, and misrepresent 4 prophecies pertaining to Dode to fabricate a divine veneer for the imaginary Ayusun was that there were no prophecies pertaining to the Greek god, Mr. Christ. Blaming the households of Israel for crucifying a mythological figure is akin to blaming Jews for Auschwitz. Should they have had the authority to impose capital punishment, which Rome did not allow, and should they have wanted to eliminate a fabled Ayusu Christoon, or in this case, as it was presented, a Mr. Christoon Ayusun, should it have been possible to torture a myth as one of their own and not a Greek or Roman, then they would have tried him in accordance with the Torah. And while there is no record of Jews ever stoning anyone, the Torah's instructions would have been to stone him. As you had mentioned, if he had said or done something in opposition to the Torah meriting death, which he could not have done, because if he had done those things, he wouldn't have qualified as the Passover lamb. So that doesn't work either. Not only didn't that occur, but what the counterfeit, but had the counterfeit been found in opposition to the Torah, he could not have been what he was being claimed. He could not be perfect if he was in opposition to the Torah. And yet Christianity is in opposition to the Torah. So if he wasn't in opposition to the Torah, he couldn't have been a Christian. He couldn't have been a Christ, leading to Christianity if he had confirmed the Torah, because Christianity exists to annul and replace the Torah. I think that's a problem.
That's what.
But again,
go to logical stuff again.
That's because, methinks, and I know logic is lost on the religious, but nonetheless, that is a logical conundrum that Christianity cannot resolve.
Mm.
Moreover, the authors of the Christian New Testament would claim in their own text that Rome tried their Jesus, and they found him innocent, and yet they crucified him anyway. Now, how's that possible? Now, if it is actually Dode, which it was, that did this, and Dode went to the Roman authorities because Dode's a big shot. I mean, they were in his city. It's the city of Dode, right? They were in Jerusalem. That's the city of Dode. It was his digs. He acquired the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount belonged to him. The whole ridge line of Zion. It was the city of Dode down there. His residence was there. The city of Jerusalem is the city of Dode. It's his. Mm-hmm. And so, when he walks in, he has a right to puff up his chest and say, this is my place. And the Romans would not have liked that. And if they would ask Dode, "Are you a king?"
You say, "Yeah."
Damn right.
King of this.
Damn right. In fact, this city has my name on it. These people bear my name. They're called Yahud, which means Yahweh and Dode, beloved of Dode, beloved of Yah. I mean, it's you happen to be in a province that's named after me and my God, Yahud. So yes. So what would Rome have done to somebody who made any one of those claims, which would all have been true about Dode, and he's not going to lie about any of them? What would they have done?
They would kill him.
Rome would have crucified him. Yeah. Would Rome have found him innocent?
No.
Hell no. No, they would have crucified him. And so the reason that Dode got himself crucified by Rome is, first of all, he wanted to be, because he wanted to fulfill Passover, and he wanted to do so in a dramatic way, and he wanted to do so in the way that he had actually explained that he would do in the 22nd Mizmor to fulfill the prophecy. But he would not lie about why he was there. And so that's why Rome crucified him. Does it make any sense for Rome to have tried the mythological Jesus and found him innocent and then crucified him anyway? Of course not. But if they had questioned Dode's, from a Roman point of view, man, he is the thing that they are most zealous about opposing.
Yeah.
He's a threat to their authority. And he's a threat to their gods. He's a threat to all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So had the counterfeit been found in opposition to the Torah, he could not have been what was claimed of him. Moreover, the authors of the Christian New Testament would claim in their own text, as I've shared, that Rome tried Jesus and found him innocent, and crucified him anyway, which is, of course, completely unbelievable. Rome was savage, but you can't build an empire the size of Rome by trying people, find them innocent, and killing them anyway.
No.
That would be unbelievably stupid. And so it's the whole thing has no credibility, but faith is for dummies after all, so why not? With the very foundation of Christianity this easily and convincingly disproven. I mean, Christianity cannot recover from what we've just done. If you're a rational and informed individual, if you've listened to this, you are no longer a Christian. And if you still claim to be a Christian, then you're too dumb for your own good.
Yeah.
So why are there any Christians? What is the benefit of believing something that's obviously untrue? Especially when it deliberately misappropriates the Word of God, condemns his people, and denounces his beloved son, and the means to our salvation, all to justify its existence. I mean, what more could you do that's bad than what they have done? For entertainment's sake, though, let's play along. You guys like a good story?
Sure.
Let's pretend that Israel existed in 33 CE. And let's pretend that Yahweh's name was really Kyrion. And let's pretend that Yahweh, as Kyrion, in a place called Israel, made a Christone. And then he turned him into a theos. And then even that someone named Iusun even existed. Let's pretend that too.
Okay.
And there was a Greek among the Jews. It's all Greek to me anyway. But he just tragically, he was found to be innocent and was a miscarriage of justice, and he was ramrodded into his death by a bunch of conniving Jews. So let's just play along. Say, okay, let's assume that he was tragically crucified. For Peter's story to ring true, we must assume that crucifixion is a Jewish invention, and that the Jews, not Romans, had the authority to convict and condemn a prisoner in Roman subjugated province of Judea, even though the authors of the Christian New Testament says that it was in fact Rome that tried him and crucified him. But couldn't have been the Romans that did it. It had to be the Jews, because God had to be mad at the Jews, even though they themselves said it was the Romans who did it. But the Romans couldn't have done it because they just blamed it on the Jews.
Well, you ask a lot.
My head, I know. Well, I'm sorry. Okay. Even then, the story falls apart if St. Peter's tale were true. Those dastardly Jews killed the God that the Lord had made. Well, if that's the case, shouldn't the Romans and the Greeks be worshiping the all-powerful Jews?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
If they did
Absolutely.
this, it's got to be the Jews that are, well, determined life and death of gods.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the Jews do determine life and death of gods because, well, the Jews created Jesus, and they created Allah, and they created Hashem. So
Right.
maybe there is some legitimacy to the story. There we go.
Okay, really? Finally.
And should this have occurred, as Peter Pan alleges, if a gaggle of religious goons were capable of killing the Christian God, how is such a pathetic deity supposed to restore the lives of men?
Well, there you have it.
Ruh-roh.
Oh.
Now, continuing to play along. You guys like a good story.
Sure. Sure, why not?
Continuing to play along. If the Lord made an Iusun, the Mr. Christun, so that he could be crucified by Jews, wouldn't the Lord be a sadist? As a sadist, wouldn't he be Satan?
Oh, yeah.
And if everyone knew this was true, why wasn't any of it predicted or explained by the prophets? Why is there no mention of an Iusun Jesus or a Christun Christ if he is the co-God of the co-conspirators? Why did the actual God, Yahweh, who despises being called the Lord, since it is Satan's title, bother with Passover when the answer was crucifixion? Why bother with the lamb if the magic is in the cross? Why did Yahweh set the example of anointing the Messiah with oil if the same status could be achieved by a lordly decree or a dip in the river at the behest of a Baptist
John the
preacher?
Baptist, yeah.
A Baptist preacher.
Yeah.
And since the prelude to the storyline required robbing Dode, why did God say that all of his promises on behalf of Dode were everlasting and that he should be called a liar if they were not accurate? Doesn't this mean that the Twistians are actually calling Yahowah a liar, even though they don't know his name?
Yeah,
Or
you're good.
would I guess they would be if they knew or
They
understood.
had a brain.
The 89th Mizmor, which, by the way, they don't cite from because, well, that would be the kryptonite to Christianity.
Yeah.
But in that it is the essence of the new religion. Why is there no mention of this transfer from the king to the counterfeit to be found anywhere in the prophets? If this was all so obvious and convincing, why did the authors of the New Testament have to consistently lie to make their point? Yeah, if they had all this evidence, why lie?
Yeah.
Why, if God was now changing sides and rejecting Jews for having killed him? There are countless prophecies affirming the restoration of his relationship with Israel and Yehudah in the last days. Why would he have hundreds of prophecies pertaining to what we're doing, what he's asked me to do for Yehud and for Israel, if in fact he's given up on them? Why would he want them awakened and redeemed if he decides he hates them? And why, if the Gentile church has become the chosen people, is God shown annihilating them on his return? I mean, we read the prophecies that they cited out of context, and those very prophecies says that God's going to annihilate the Gentiles. As a matter of fact, he says it's going to be nothing but corpses amongst the Gentiles. And those are the prophecies that they cherry-picked for their religion. Perhaps there's some glitches. There's some glitches here in the Christian story, which should have been worked out before its debut. Someone should have sent Peter, Paul, Luke, Mark, and Timothy back to the drawing board before they published this script. Either that, or perhaps the Jews should have crucified them as, well, we're doing now.
Yeah, they should have.
As we unravel this twisted tapestry, we have to unwind the script because Acts 2:36 begins with therefore. If you recall, this train wreck began with Peter pilfering a pronouncement affirming Dode's privileged position with Yahowah. Boy, a little iteration there, right? Peter pilfering a prophetic pronouncement affirming Dode's privileged position with Yahowah, and Peter Piper picked a peck of peppers.
Very good.
A psalm. I remember this was a psalm about and to Dode. So this is a psalm about and to Dode, the beloved. Yahowah prophetically announces, that name again. Yahowah, Dode and Yahowah. So here are the two names that they want to completely ignore, erase. They don't want you to know. A psalm about Dode, the beloved. Yahowah prophetically announces in advance of it occurring concerning my Lord. Now this is the one that's writing this is Nathan speaking of Dode, of my Lord, the upright one. You have chosen of your own accord to actually dwell at my right side as an eternal witness. I will place your enemies and those who discount you as a footstool to your feet. Therefore, the fallacious nature of the religion with a twist of demonic duplicity, this somehow co-opted and convoluted into yet another way to deprive the actual Messiah and Son of God and Passover Lamb of his due so that these credits could be awarded to the Christian counterfeit. So the pipsqueak that was Peter desecrated the most exceptional man in human history by misappropriating and misquoting the prior declaration and incredulously saying, for DD, Delta Delta, Delta Dawn, I guess DD is supposed to be David, let's just pretend.
Yeah, that's the
For Delta Delta, by the way, if it's a divine placeholder, that would mean that, that Dode's deified, but forget that for the moment. For Delta Delta did not ascend to heaven. Do you know that? That Dowd didn't ascend to heaven. So what was the purpose of Bikurim? How is God going to return and restore Dowd to his throne in the end on Yom Kippurim if Dowd didn't ascend to heaven? And if Dowd didn't ascend to heaven, and Yahweh says, he's my chosen one, he's my Messiah, he's my king, he's the guy that I'm anointed, he is my son, my firstborn son, he is everything that matters.
Yeah.
I don't have a shot.
Yeah. and you think that Peter and Paul and Luke have a shot? If Dowd doesn't have a shot,
Right.
just give it up.
Yeah.
If Dowd, who opened the door to eternal life and God's home, and is God's most beloved person, who God says, oh, by the way, that guy's right.
Yeah.
If he didn't ascend to heaven, just fold up the tent,
Mhm.
go away, and you'd recognize that Yahweh is going to be lonely. Now, that's just the reality of it. So to say this, that Dowd did not ascend to heaven, and Dowd is the one man that God says, he is my son, I am his father. And the person that Yahweh says, I love,
Yes.
and that I chose. To say that, what do you think God thinks of the Christian New Testament and the book of Acts for saying that Dowd did not ascend to heaven?
It's on.
Oh.
Worse.
I don't think you could say anything that would aggravate God more. And so when the Christian pretends that this is a book inspired by God, and all they did is piss God off, I mean, these are fighting words. This is why God said, I'm disgusted, I'm appalled, I'm wrathful, I'm angry, I'm disgusted. That's right. For Dowd did not ascend to heaven, but he himself said, Lord, my Lord, sits and resides out of my right side. Lord, my Lord. Lord, my Lord, resides out of my right side. We think we're a gangly again, right? That growth on the somehow, my right side. Until I put your enemies as a footstool for your feet. Therefore, let every household in Israel with certainty that the Kyrios, Lord, made him the Christon, and God this Iusun, whom you crucified. Your transition to the lie was the most grotesque lie that a human could possibly make. I'm here to tell you, fellows, and we'll end this program with this.
Okay.
That calling Yahweh Lord is an unforgivable sin.
Yes.
Erasing Yahweh's name so that it is unknown to the people that you're speaking to about him is an unforgivable sin, which means the entire Christian New Testament is an unforgivable sin. Denigrating God's people, demonizing them, is an unforgivable sin. All of these things would anger God. Contradicting the Torah, you're going to earn God's wrath. And they did that. Negating the covenant and replacing it, certain to anger God.
Mm-hmm.
Eliminating the Moed Mikre, which are the means to engage in a relationship with God, absolutely certain to anger the Almighty. But none of those things come anywhere close to the thing they did right here. The single thing that the one thing that you can do that would earn God's eternal anger and kindle his hatred of you beyond anything else
Spare your son?
is to denigrate his son.
Yeah.
Nothing you could do worse than Acts 2:36. It's the single worst offense a human can commit against Almighty God. And that means the basis of the Christian New Testament, which is all about robbing Dowd, denying Dowd, even keeping Dowd out of heaven. To create this myth of Jesus Christ is anathema to God. It is it's appalling. It's revolting. It's an abomination. And when we are tasked with the job of judging and condemning those who have promoted Christianity, if we were to be slack in our punishment of these individuals,
Wouldn't be right.
we would be put ourselves in jeopardy with Yahowah. They did this to his son. That's like raping a man's daughter and thinking that the man is going to invite you over for dinner. No. I wish, fellas, we did get a few laughs in. I'm sorry that I ended this on such a somber note, but this is a great travesty. And the fact that this has become the most popular religion in human history, it just disgusts me. I feel such a pain for our God, and now I have some appreciation as to why God speaks so highly of what we're doing, because we're the first ever
to do it.
To do what we're doing to excoriate Christianity based upon God's perspective, doing it the way God wants it done.
Thank you.
And so you have to know that in the midst of all of this anguish, we have given our Heavenly Father a moment of solace. We have given him something to smile about, that finally, at long last, he found someone that was willing to do what needed to be done. And I think we have done it well. I think that Yahowah is pleased with the 5 volumes of Twistianity.
Mm-hmm.
And with this now more extensive rewrite of Qatsyr Harvest, so that we are put in a position where we are plowing the soil. We're tilling the soil by pulling out the weeds of heresy so that the grain can grow for the Shabbat harvest. And it's all found here. This is 825 pages of analysis of what can be known about the harvest of Shabbat, about the gleaning of Towrah. And that is why we're presenting this to you. And gentlemen, we've come to the end of our program. I want to thank you for contributing to it. And
love being here. Thank you.
Yeah,
yes,
thank
sir.
you. And Kevin, I really do love the shorts where you can see I am doing my best to introduce them and to position them correctly. I think that your shorts are going to have a prominent place on the new website, right under Yahowah's branding. The first thing that's going to appear is 2 lines of 9 each of the shorts.
Wow.
They create the best introduction to this story, and underneath those will probably be in the range of 12 or so long format versions of the Yahowah blog.
Mm-hmm.
And then below that, we're going to have all of our links to the social media sites, because this is our way of communicating to God's people at this time,
Right.
where God told us to go to get this done. And below that, we're actually going to dispense with the bookshelf, the thing that I had fallen in love with, the thing that I had orchestrated for all of these years is this. I wanted this bookshelf because I thought the bookshelf created a sense of credibility. I mean, you see books of this size and you recognize that there's, I've written 36 of them. I think there's 34 on the bookshelf. There's a lot of credibility that comes in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make it accessible to people. Pick any book, you can open and read it. But we are going to a new formatted site, and the new formatted site will work much better if we present the books just like we're presenting these video programs. So there'll be an image of the cover of the book, and you click on the book, and you'll actually be able to turn the pages of the book. There'll be bookmarks and everything else, but it will be a page turner. And they will be presented individually in rows, just like the videos are presented in rows. And that's going to be the homepage, and it's going to be with Yahowah's name on the top. We're going to try to make it as animated, as exciting as possible. There'll be this beautiful version of the menorah that's up here over my left shoulder. Is going to be on the dominant introduction to the site, and then you're going to see what follows from there. And there'll be links to pages that have all of these videos. I think there's probably now in the range of 250 of them. There'll be a link to all of them, and we're going to make them play such that we're going to actually take the visitor to YouTube, which is the best repository. They have by far the best structure for videos. But you're going to, when you're viewing them, you're going to essentially stay with us on the site, and you'll be able to have all of them laid out there for you in a beautiful menu of them, and be able to choose them both on shorts and on the long presentations. And then there will be another listing of all of these presented as audio formats that people can download and play on their phones or whatever device they want to, as they're going about their lives during the day. And then our goal is to have another page that looks very much like Facebook, where you can present a picture and a caption, and then write an essay, if you want to, on the news or on some topic, which you see a lot of now on our Facebook page. There will be a page that's devoted to that sort of thing as well. So this is the direction we're going with the new site, and it is well underway. My really beloved friend Joe is now quite relieved that I gave up on the idea of the bookshelf for the page turner, and it was not a sacrifice, because now that means that homepage, everything gets the same weight. The shorts, the longs, the links to the various social media sites that we're presenting this message on, and the books themselves are all presented the same way. And we're doing what YAHOWAH wanted. We're going from the whole thing being branded in his name with his sign, the menorah, and then everything on down, emphasizing these live stream videos going down to being reinforced by the books. So that is what's being developed, and we should have something, fortunately, I think, before this coming Passover. We're 2 weeks away from Passover. It is Saturday, the 12th is a Saturday, correct, Leah?
I think so.
I think Saturday is the 12th. So Saturday evening, the 12th, is when we will begin celebrating Pesach. Now, again, I am not dictatorial on this. There is a way to view a astronomical new moon by the absolute thinnest margins the day before, so that the 14th day, as it begins on the night of the 13th day, would be on a Friday night. And so if somebody wants to begin celebrating Pesach during the Shabbat, they can do so. And I would have no quarrel with that at all. And there's some symmetry of doing that. But and the nice thing about doing that is then you would actually be in sync with what happened in 33 CE.
Right.
And that would kind of be nice. So I might make the exception. I might make the exception here, because God's far more interested in us understanding the purpose of these things and celebrating the purpose of them and sharing the purpose and sharing who fulfilled them and when the upcoming events will be fulfilled and how Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim make Shabuah possible, which is the next harvest. He's far more interested in that than he is anything else. And if we were to move it a day forward, which we'd have justification, because technically there is the very thinnest of sign of renewed light on the moon, then we could celebrate it consistent with the way it was celebrated in 33 CE or 4,000 Yah. I think there'd be some symmetry to that and some enjoyment to it. And that means that 2 weeks from now, we would be celebrating this show as part of part. Yeah. So, in fact, with Hezekiah, you can have two. Hezekiah had two celebrations.
I like Hezekiah.
Yeah, and Leah knows that I'm like cuckoo crazy for lamb and for matzah and dripping it in And the olive oil and bitter herbs, kind of a secret around here, is that is my go-to snack year round. And so I would have no problem with having multiple Passovers. But I think I'm going to, and we actually celebrate matzah very similar to the way we celebrate Pesach. We have the lamb as the featured dish. Obviously the unleavened bread, the matzah and the olive oil with the bitter herbs and the glass of red wine. That's our go-to meal also on matzah. And guess what? It's also our go-to meal on Pesach. And shoot us if we're in a rut. And I understand that whatever the lamb has to be destroyed that night, and then you go again. But you know they do have this lovely way of being able to have your lamb in advance. And we're just although Leah now has lammies here on the island, we just I'm not about to go and butcher my own. So, I don't like to eat things with faces on them. So anyway, we can talk about that. I'm actually leaning towards. I think I just love the symmetry of celebrating Pesach on a Friday evening.
Yeah.
So I'll look at the evidence again, see if we can justify it, and I think we can, and talk it over with the boss and not the one wearing a dress to my right here, but the
other one,
the other one, the big guy, and see if he's okay if we do it. It'd put us a day earlier than Hebcal, but I don't think he cares about that one iota. So, something to think about, which means that we will soon start doing programs also that share some insights into the nature of and the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. And so we'll have to take a step away from our ongoing programs on Shavuot. Which really isn't a taking away from it, because God was very clear. Shavuot is a Bakurim harvest, and Bakodim is the result of Pesach and Matzah. So we're still on the same subject. All right, fellas. Best to Sylvia. I hope she gets healthy and that she stops being a dizzy broad. We don't want that to happen. That's a bad thing. We understand that you're cooking for her, which may be what's making her tipsy. So we gotta stop that too, Captain Kirk. I appreciate all the communication we had this week. It was really a lovely week between the two of us in terms of communication. And Kevin, again, you're the one that sends me 4 or 5 of these shorts that are beautifully produced every day, and I thank you for creating them out of these shows.
My pleasure.
I think it makes a big difference when people have the opportunity to listen to what God has to say to them, but don't have to devote an hour or two to it. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good
Shabbat
night.
Thank you both.